We try and keep it real and answer your questions. And a question has been sent in regarding masturbation and porn. On this podcast episode, we're going to address the topic of masturbation. Now, this is just my take on this. This is not a religious take. This is not a take which will be applicable to everyone. This is my 2 pence. Take it or leave it, however you want. If there's something that I say which helps you in this, then please take that bit and ignore the bits that you don't have interest in. So firstly, I'm going to go into a bit of my story. So I think this is a very difficult topic, or a very difficult thing for lots of young men. Is something that a lot of people struggle with. And I think that with any kind of behavior change, when you shame someone and say you shouldn't do this or this is wrong, I don't think people change like that. I don't think that's the effective mechanism for change. I don't know personally of anybody who has changed through being shamed for any kind of behavior, masturbation, alcohol, cigarettes, or being fat, watching too much TV, whatever it may be. I don't think shaming is the way to go. And I think because of the shaming, there's a lot of stigma around this, and the problem is a lot greater than people know about, and it's a lot greater than it would be if this was a topic which was openly discussed and fathers could have conversations with their sons about it and friends could have open conversations about it. I think this wouldn't be such an issue then. But because everything is happening behind closed doors, this is a big problem, and a lot of people evidently are experiencing problems, guilt, shame, uncertainty, anxiety around this topic. So that's my first caveat to this, is that this in no way is meant to demonize any kind of behavior. This podcast is supposed to be a safe place where we present different points of view with the aim of trying to be inspirational and trying to be positive more than anything. So looking at it from that lens, from a Western perspective, masturbation is perfectly healthy, it's normal, and there's nothing wrong with it. And lots of people anecdotally do masturbate many times a day, and there's lots of stuff about that. So on the other end of the extreme, from again a Western perspective, there's people like sports people like Mike Tyson, who is quoted for saying that he would not masturbate or have sexual intercourse 6 months before a fight because he wanted to maintain his focus. There's books like Think and Grow Rich, which say masturbation is not good if you want to be successful, because it drains your energy away from things like creativity and hard work and divert your focus into other things. And Elon Musk, he's got this interview, which I believe was on the Joe Rogan show, and he was saying how he believes masturbation is a pointless exercise because it leads to nothing. He was saying if there was a point of thinking about women and it was going to lead to a positive outcome in some way, a better improvement in quality of life or better rates of happiness, or then it would be a purposeful activity. But he said the amount of time that people spend thinking about women, or women thinking about men, if they used that time to do something towards a cause or some kind of purpose, then imagine what they could achieve. These are just some opinions. I'm not saying whether any of them are right or wrong, just trying to give a broad spectrum of opinions on the topic from different people. Now, from a religious perspective, I've listened to YouTube videos by Sadhguru where he talks about part of your soul, part of yourself being given away through physical contact, and thinking about another person, masturbation being one of those methods. I watched videos on Islamic preacher, Dr. something, and he says masturbation is perfectly normal. It's been done throughout history and will continue to be done. And where the Quran talks about preserving your guarding your genitalia, it's in reference to outside of marriage, nobody else should see your private parts, which makes complete sense. And then there's the Christian view, which is it's a sin to think about another person outside of your marriage. And there's the Sikh view, which is that you should not think about anybody apart from your spouse. My conversations with Gursikhs that I've spoken to on the topic of sexual intercourse have been around how Gurbani does talk about Gam being a Mork and Gam being things that God provides, but it's within the context of being married, and it's within the context of a mutual relationship where both people are having their needs met. So the direct question around masturbation, which is what this topic was about, I have never addressed with an elder Gursikh. And I assume the opinion would be that if your purpose of life is to meet God, then you should focus on that. And this is not something that's going to help you towards that. So those are just a broad range of opinions. There is also the opinion that, as well as trying to guard your energy, that if you want to follow a spiritual path and you're doing something and you feel like it's wrong, then maybe that's not a good thing to do, regardless of what anyone says, whether they say it's okay or not. But then how much of that is because it's been stigmatized and demonized, and how much of that is because our intuition is, or our spirit is telling us that that's something that we shouldn't be doing. So that's for you guys to comment on. I don't know the answer to that one. I am going to read you some research from this book, Own Your Day. It's written by one of Joe Rogan's friends, a guy who owns a supplement company. And he quotes some research on masturbation, which is really interesting. And he talks about an experiment that was done on a rhesus monkey, which has very similar type of DNA to human beings. And what the professor did was he placed a catheter into the sexual centers of the monkey's brain. So when you pressed a button, the monkey would have an orgasm. It sounds all very strange, but he was trying to explore whether masturbation has any negative impacts. And so the negative impacts weren't as prevalent physically as they were mentally. So what he found was that the monkeys would press the button, so stimulating an orgasm, for 16 hours a day, and they would stop to sleep from exhaustion, and then they would continue pressing the button. They would only take short breaks to feed and to toilet, and they would go straight back to stimulating the orgasm. Now, take from that what you may, but the book's hypothesis is that masturbation is not unhealthy, but anything done in excess can lead to something called hedonistic adaptation, which is you have some cake and it tastes good, and you eat cake on a cheat day once a week, it tastes good. But if you had cake every meal for a year, you'd probably hate it. But with this, what they hypothesize is you adapt to it and you don't find as much pleasure in everyday activities, in everyday connection with your spouse, with your partner, with other things that should bring you joy. And you also then fail to, it affects things like erectile dysfunctions. Because of the hedonistic adaptation, there's a physiological process where you're not being stimulated enough because you've been overstimulated for things that are not true, but your mind sees as true because you're watching them or seeing them or imagining them. So you can go quite deep into this, but when experiments have been done on basketball players who visualize shooting 3-pointers and from basketball players who have actually done that task, they found similar improvements. So visualizing the task and actually doing it has very similar effects on the brain. So in that, if we extrapolate that onto this experiment, if you're constantly thinking about women or males, and that's going to have an imprint on you, that's going to have an imprint on your psyche, and it's potentially going to be very difficult then to do other stuff or to find joy in normal relationships when the kinds of people you've been seeing are photoshopped images or pornography or other types of things. So these are just some considerations, and this is the opinion of one opinion from one book. You may not agree with this, you may agree, but his summary was that it's a healthy behavior provided it's done in moderation. And I think personally, I think if there was greater transparency around this topic, a lot less people would suffer from it, and a lot less people would struggle with it inside themselves without being able to talk to anyone about it. So I think there definitely needs to be a lot more work done on this topic. Hopefully this podcast episode will go some way into opening that discussion and seeing what you guys think, seeing whether you think it's a good thing, a bad thing, a normal thing, an unhealthy thing, something that can be done in moderation, something that should never be done and is forbidden. I think there's a whole scope and of opinions on this topic, and I think everyone's opinion is valid. Above all, we want health and well-being for all. We want we want everyone to do well. And so if you're finding benefit in any one theology, one paradigm of thinking, then that's great for you. You've just got to find, in my opinion, what works for you. And if that works for you, then great. The opinion is probably going to diverge greatly depending on whether you're religious, whether you're not religious, whether you have addictive tendencies, lots of other kinds of factors. Like, for example, certain things that other people might struggle with, you might not struggle with. So you might have the healthiest diet in the world and never eat pizza and chips and you chocolates, and you might not understand why people eat that. And that's okay. That's a real big blessing that you don't struggle with that thing. But there's people out there who may really struggle with food and have an emotional connection with food and have a reliance upon it as a coping or comfort mechanism. So it's just about hopefully trying to create a space where we're not judging each other and we're just trying to help each other grow. And whether that means whichever road somebody goes down, as long as we can do it in a respectful way and we can do it in a supportive way, then I think that's the end goal. What do you think on this? I think it's a contentious topic. These are just my thoughts, but I'd love to hear what you think.